David Brown. I saw your Q&A about COVID vaccinations and whether people should be forced to take them. I lean toward individualism myself, but I basically agree with you on the justifiability of forcibly quarantining patient zero. So I wanted to ask you about something in a similar vein that I've found disturbing for some time. There seems to be in the West today an attitude by some people that a single individual takes priority over the entire rest of the world. And in my own experience, this seems more ascendant on parts of the left. From people who justify no platforming and banning speakers because someone who can't bear the thought of that person even being in the city, to the people who routinely slander military intervention against groups like ISIL as quote-unquote bombing children, and by extension seem to say, whether they will admit it or not, that mass killings by groups such as ISIL are okay compared to the stopping of such killings at the cost of some inadvertent civilian casualties. What I think disturbed me most about this as a child was during an episode of the kid-friendly Doctor Who spin-off, The Sarah Jane Adventures. At the end of the episode, an alien is about to destabilize satellites around the Earth and cause them to crash directly into nuclear power plants, effectively ending the world as we know it. But the main protagonist reaches the console that can stop it before the alien does. In response, one of her companions is held at gunpoint with the warning that they will be killed if she presses the buttons to stop the satellite crash. Despite the urging of a third companion to press it anyway, she refuses, saying, and I quote, "One life is as sacred as the entire planet." The situation is essentially resolved by Deus ex machina, if I remember correctly. What disturbed me at the time, when I was about 13, I think, and still does today, is that you literally had the titular character be prepared to see billions of people die just so she doesn't feel responsible for one death. She wouldn't even have been directly killing anyone. It seems clear that this view is being glorified or at least promoted, and to young children at that, or else why would the main character, who never apologizes or seems to change her mind subsequently, be the mouthpiece for it? I'm interested to know if you think there's something to this. Do you think that these kinds of views are being promoted, glorified, or are otherwise working their way into popular discourse? And if not, what do you think are the forces holding them at bay? Hi, David. Thank you for this question. I know you asked it. I've taken my time getting to this one, but I wanted to think about it a little bit. And actually, I have done a lot of reading. I think what we're talking about here, and actually this might surprise you, but I think what we're talking about here is the very slow shift, cultural shift that we've been seeing happen since the Enlightenment started. I mean, the Reformation and the Enlightenment and the change in the individual versus the group. And this is I guess you could say, a spectrum where all individual, all group, right? At both ends, polar opposites of the spectrum of consideration as to what is or isn't important. Should the individual be sacrificed for the group? Should the group be sacrificed for the individual? What's the axiomatic statement here? Well, according to Spock, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And this is standard Star Trek genre, right? And I think Wrath of Khan actually demonstrated this principle in action in one of the most, impactful and emotional ways possible, because, of course, Spock sacrifices himself at the end of Wrath of Khan. Spoiler from a movie from 1982, so that the crew can live, right? And that very clearly demonstrates the exact opposite of the principle that you're talking about that was put forward in the Doctor Who spinoff. So we have this sort of push-pull between these two poles going on in society. And I think that this question has been taken up by philosophers, by psychologists, and of course sociologists, and lots of people have, various degrees of interest in this question, this philosophical point. And I take it back to the Enlightenment because this is the period of time when really deep, serious thinkers really started thinking very heavily and writing very well about, and very cleverly about, concepts like freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of belief. Maybe I don't want to believe this. Maybe I got some other ideas. How does that fit into the bigger picture? Do I have the right to think the way I want to think, or am I supposed to, as a member of this society or social system, am I supposed to curb my thinking and to conform with the group? This is a question we all have to ask ourselves over and over again in life as we are confronted by the problems of living in a group. Do we want to comply with these rules? Do we want to follow these morals? Do we want to change our mind to respond to what the group wants from us? Whether that group is our job, a hobby club, a martial arts dojo, your church, or the society that you live in overall. And the larger the group becomes, of course, the less clear it is what the group's about, what it wants from us, how we're supposed to interact with it. And this is why we kind of pull the reins back in and represent groups by individuals or slogans or symbols or ideas that we can kind of get our wits around and hold on to those as our idea of what the group is rather than trying to confront the entire group. I don't know about you, but the last time I tried to consult the entire United States of America on a decision, it didn't work out so well, right? I have no means to do that. So I can only talk to so many people at once or be aware of what so many people want from me at once. And this is another factor in the problem of how the individuals and the groups get along with each other. This is Sociology 101. It's fascinating stuff, and there's tons and tons of things to know about it. But as far as the rights questions you're talking about here, and this idea that that somehow in popular discourse there's been this motion away from the good of the group and toward the good of the individual over the group. Well, I'm just trying to point out that this is a counter reaction to centuries of history where the individual wasn't anything really special and the group was kind of everything in many, many ways. And this was really kind of lived more through the caste system or social orders or hierarchies, right? Where you had your place, and your place was what you were born into, whether you were born into a lower class, a middle class, or an upper class. That was it. That's where you were. And there wasn't any moving around in the class system. If you were lower class, you were lower class for life. If you were upper class, you were born into the aristocracy, you were a royal for life. You were always going to be that. This tends to be how we've structured our societies. Everything I'm going to tell you or talk about here is going to have an exception somehow. But I believe what I'm saying is the majority position, whether we're dealing with Western European society, African society, Central American society, I mean, all over the world, this is kind of how things developed. But following the Enlightenment, these questions started coming up of, well, wait a minute, hang on, what about individuals? Aren't they important too? Don't they have value? Don't people have something to contribute as individuals? And then maybe we should be thinking about that too. What are the rights of man? Right? I mean, again, lots and lots of thinkers through lots and lots of decades and a couple centuries now have been tackling these questions. So in our popular discourse now, you see this come out in shows like this where you see the needs of the individual are outweighing the needs of the group. And from the perspective of the individual, that is sometimes very, very legit. Sometimes you do have to put your own needs ahead of that of the group when the group is demanding things from you that are going to kill you or are going to seriously impact your way of life, and you don't want that. So you're going to push back. And that's the push-pull of the individual versus the society or the group. And that wasn't always an option, you see. And this is just one way of looking at it. I know there are other ways of talking about this, but I'm just sort of proposing, think about it this way, right? After centuries and centuries of you will comply, you will conform, you will fit in with your assigned position, now we have a different take. Now we've got a take where your voice has value, you have meaning, and you as an individual can do things outside of what the society or the group dictates you do or be. And that we call freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of action, movement. This is where human rights, natural rights developed from, is this whole idea of the conflict between what are my obligations and responsibilities to the group versus to myself as a living entity, life unit. What do I owe to myself? What do I owe to the group? How do I work this out? And so I agree with you that I think it's taken to a bit of an extreme when the hero of the story is contemplating, that one life is as sacred as the whole planet. Clearly somebody's, got their priorities a little twisted up there, because the math on that doesn't work out at all in any way. But it's following on this heels of this sort of cultural revolution, you could say, that's been hundreds of years in the process of going, of this post-Enlightenment sort of think, right? And it's very, very interesting how you can see in the 20th century, how you started seeing pushback after the world wars and stuff. This is what postmodernism is all about, is pushing back on this. And anyway, there's more to it than that. It's not, postmodernism isn't just about the individual versus the group. It's about other things, actually, kind of. But I'm bringing it in because there has been intellectuals pushing back on the Enlightenment values, and that's now a serious bone of contention in philosophy and academia and stuff, is the whole postmodernism versus modernism and Enlightenment values. And this is where we get true, or what is it, the original liberalism is being talked about now. Like, I'm traditional. I'm a traditional liberalist or something. Versus, your more progressive values that people have right now, which might be focused a little too much on the individual and not enough on the group in some ways. But at the same time, with there's another way of looking at the effort to silence individuals, as you mentioned in your question, where we see these attempts to ban speakers and stuff like that, is really not fighting for the rights of the individual. It's really pushing back against an individual. It's just an individual they don't like. So in a way, it's really more groupthink. Like I said, this gets complicated. There's lots of ways of looking at it. You know what I mean? It's just like, philosophy, damn it. This is why people get headaches starting to think about this stuff, it's complicated, So I don't know. I can just give some commentary here kind of off the cuff about this. I'm really just sort of talking out my ass about it. But I think that the individual is important, and I think that the recognition of individual rights and human rights is a very important concept that we need to hold on to, because it's the basis of our entire Western society at this point, and we've achieved great things on this philosophical platform. But we can take individuality too far, and I think that American society, in a way, kind of has. In that, everybody's got a voice, and everybody's voice is equal, and everybody has a say, and we should listen to all of them. And then you find out after a while, maybe not. Some of these uninformed, uneducated, very wild opinions and ideas, conspiracy theories, anti-vax ideas, all this kind of stuff. These are not helpful individual ideas. These are things that are rubbing the group the wrong way, because it has to do with the survival of the group, the very literal life and death of the individuals and the group itself. So individualism can be overrated too, right? And this is where we have to find that balance. This is what the struggle between the left and the right, and conservative and liberal, this is what it's all about. This is what cults are all about, is trying to, where do we draw that line? Well, clearly cults have drawn it way too far over to the extreme end, where the group is all and the individual is nothing. But we can also go the opposite direction, say the individual is all and the group is nothing, and have utter chaos and anarchy. And that's not really great either. So where do we draw lines? That's what the debates are all about. So anyway, I guess that's my commentary on that question. However, whatever use it might have for y'all. And there you go.